At the time of this story, my wife, who was 32, had a friend from college who eventually became her best friend. They partied like wild women, so much so that it's a wonder my wife didn't drop out of school. I met my wife, who was 35 at the time, on her first day at work. I was responsible for showing her around the office since I had been there for a few years before she was hired. Eventually, we got married, and that's where this story picks up. After 6 years of marriage, her wild college friend finally got engaged. My wife was shocked that her friend was even ready to settle down. Maybe she thought her friend enjoyed being single for a longer time or something. Early in our marriage, we had agreed that my wife wouldn't stay close to this girl for the sake of our relationship. One evening, not long after my wife found out her friend was engaged, she told me she was going to visit her parents and wouldn't be back until after dinner. It didn't seem odd to me, so I said okay. When I came home from work that night and took out the trash, I noticed something like a postcard sticking out of the side of the trash bag. My curiosity got the better of me, and I read it through the plastic. It was an invitation to a bachelorette party happening that night at a strip club in the city. I didn't hesitate. I got in my car and drove straight there. I didn't want my wife looking at other men or getting caught up in the wild party behavior she used to indulge in. When I arrived, I started asking around for my wife and the bride, calling them by name. Eventually, a woman told me they had left the party not long ago with 2 men. I couldn't believe it. When I asked where they went, the woman hesitated but eventually gave me the name of a hotel after I begged and offered some money. I was stunned. I started calling my wife's phone over and over as I made my way to the hotel lobby, but she didn't pick up. I asked the receptionist for their room number, but she wouldn't give it to me. So, I waited in the lobby, pacing and trying to keep calm. After a while, I saw my wife coming off the elevator with a man. Both of them looked pretty pleased, until my wife saw me. Her face dropped, and she gasped, covering her mouth. Tears immediately started flowing uncontrollably. When the man realized I was her husband, he looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but not wanting to get involved. I asked my wife what had just happened. She seemed frozen, unable to speak. After a long moment, she finally said that she had made a bad decision and suggested we go home to talk about it. I asked her again what they had done, but she just stared at me, speechless. She grabbed my hand, trying to lead me out of the lobby, but I pulled away, telling her that I wasn't taking her back home if she had cheated on me. She couldn't handle it and collapsed on the lobby floor, crying. Her friend came down and looked shocked at the scene. The truth came out. My wife had lied to her friend, telling her we had been separated for months. We eventually sat in my car, but before I could drive anywhere, my wife admitted that she couldn't resist having fun with her friend. It was the kind of fun I wouldn't approve of because it wasn't moral or respectful of the vows we had made. She confessed that after years of marriage, she started feeling like she needed a spark, something to break the monotony and ignite a fire in her. That's when I had heard enough. I summed it up for her. She felt bored in our marriage, so she cheated on me. I told her I was done and couldn't forgive her. I didn't want to be married to her anymore. She started wailing, and after asking her several times to get out of the car, she finally did. I drove away, leaving her behind. Her brother ended up taking her in and came to my house a week later to collect her belongings. After about a month, he grew tired of having her around. She was miserable. She couldn't go to work or find any hope for the future. She called me constantly, asking what I was doing and begging to come over. I refused every time. I didn't want her back in my life, and I wasn't about to be manipulated into forgiving her. I knew that women could be cunning when they wanted something, and after what she did, I couldn't take any chances. I stopped answering her calls altogether. I've learned from this experience that I can't control what my spouse does, but I can protect myself when necessary. Even though I loved her for many years, I realized I could move on and love someone else in the future. Now, 2 years later, my ex is still living with her brother. They hate each other now, and she's become bitter because I never forgave her for what she called just one night of fun. She spends her time on social media, preaching about how wrong partying and drinking are. Commenter, OP, I'm really sorry your wife lied and cheated on you at her friend's bachelorette party. It's clear that she prioritized her own desires, no matter how wrong they were, over you. She only felt bad because she got caught. She became resentful because she never expected her choices to have such harsh consequences. It seems like she viewed the years you spent together as time where her life was put on hold, and no one deserves to feel that way. What she did was completely unfair and unforgivable. I'm glad you found the invitation and discovered the truth, as painful as that night was. You were wise not to let her back into your life, not even for a second. I wish you the best as you move forward. Now, for today's second story, my wife, who was 27, had a big issue with comparing herself to her younger, prettier sister Madison. Madison stayed single and never gave up chasing her dream career. She was very successful and even built a following on TikTok, which irritated my wife to no end, though she never openly admitted it. Occasionally, she would vent to me about Madison, but she always followed it up by expressing her love for her sister. During the time we were dating, and even after we got married, my wife would occasionally ask me if I ever wished I had met her sister instead. I always reassured her that, of course, I didn't, that I truly believed we were meant to be together and that she deserved her own happiness, separate from her sister, no matter what Madison was doing with her life. But despite what I told her, my wife never seemed to understand the message. She constantly stalked her sister and compared our lives to those of other people. However, whenever she spoke to her sister directly, she was always supportive and never gave any hint of jealousy. Things really came apart when Madison got engaged. We agreed to meet her and her fiancé for dinner, and sure enough, her fiancé was a successful, well-put-together guy. They suited each other perfectly, and I was genuinely happy for them, but my wife wasn't. She put on an act, but as soon as we got into the car afterward, she started acting strange, quiet, glued to her phone. I had a feeling she was stalking Madison's fiancé on social media. Over the next few days, my wife began acting friendlier toward me again, and over the next few weeks, she met with her sister several times while I was at work. The first time, she didn't even tell me about it. I only found out because our security system logs the times when someone leaves the house. After she went out 2 more times, I confronted her, asking what was going on. She told me that Madison was starting to have doubts about trusting her fiancé. This didn't add up to me. When I saw them, they looked happy and confident together. So, I started looking at Madison's Facebook while my wife was supposedly meeting her, and everything seemed fine. Madison was posting happy updates about her wedding plans. Finally, I messaged Madison to ask if she was with my wife. She said no and asked why I was asking. My heart sank. I explained that my wife had told me she'd been meeting with her a few times that week. Madison seemed concerned and mentioned that her fiancé had been going to the gym a lot more lately. She told me she would try to call him, but he didn't answer. We couldn't track their locations either, so we had no choice but to wait for them to come home. Madison texted me later, telling me that her fiancé had just arrived at her house at the exact same time my wife pulled into our driveway. When my wife walked in, I lost it. I tried to stay calm, but my voice was shaking, and I eventually started yelling. I told her I knew she wasn't with her sister, and that her sister's fiancé had been missing too. Instead of admitting anything, she had the audacity to accuse me of liking her sister just because I had messaged her. Before I could respond, she snapped, saying I could have her sister if I wanted, because she was asking for a divorce. I was completely stunned by what she was saying. I told her I didn't have feelings for Madison. Madison only helped me realize that my wife had been lying. I demanded to know where she had been and why she suddenly wanted a divorce. That's when she dropped the bomb. Madison's fiancé, AP, had fallen in love with her. He supposedly realized how much better she was than her younger sister, who was afraid of commitment. I looked her in the eye and told her she was crazy. I couldn't believe she'd do something so cruel as to steal her sister's man when they seemed so happy. I insulted her, and she slapped me before storming out with luggage she had already packed. She was acting as if she and AP were destined to be together, and the sooner she left me, the sooner they'd live happily ever after. In shock, I called Madison, who answered despite being in the middle of a screaming match with AP. I could hear him crying and apologizing to her. She dismissed him and went into another room to tell me what had happened. Apparently, my wife had convinced him to meet with her a few times to get to know the man her sister was going to marry. She had kept it a secret from Madison and me, claiming we'd overreact. Eventually, she manipulated him into sleeping with her as some twisted way to prove he was worthy of Madison's love. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, it was so messed up. I apologized to Madison on behalf of my wife, knowing her actions had ruined Madison's plans to marry the man of her dreams. AP immediately regretted it and begged for her forgiveness, but Madison told me she was done with him. Without much hesitation, I told her I was divorcing my wife, too. Neither of them deserved us. We made a sort of survival pact to get through it and move on, stronger and wiser. A year later, Madison and I are seeing each other regularly, and our relationship is slowly becoming more romantic. AP moved away as soon as he realized Madison wasn't going to forgive him, and he didn't even think about trying to start something with my wife. He admitted she was just a mistake. Once my ex realized that, she started calling me constantly, begging for a chance to come over, have a chat, or spend the night. I refused every time, only answering when she wouldn't stop calling. Eventually, she went so far as to camp out in my yard. I had to get a restraining order after the divorce was finalized. One day, she was in the yard again when Madison came over to hang out, and she lost her mind. I was ready to call the police, but thankfully, the restraining order and the threat of trespassing charges kept her at bay. After that, I didn't hear from her again. The last update I got was that her dad had to bail her out of jail for something ridiculous. Commenter, OP, your wife had some kind of unhealthy obsession with her sister's life, and it completely destroyed her. It proved what she feared all along, that her sister was the better woman. Comparisons like that can drain all the good out of someone's life, and it was your wife's responsibility to grow up and focus on what's important in marriage: communication, honesty, and selflessness. She failed at being both a supportive sister and a decent spouse. She'll never have a meaningful relationship if she doesn't learn how to be selfless and honorable. You did the right thing by refusing to give her a second chance after everything that happened. You're a strong example to others going through similar betrayals. What's your opinion on ARP's situation? Thanks for tuning into our stories, where revenge is served hot. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated. And remember, if you're under 18, this isn't for the faint of heart. Tune in next time to satisfy your revenge cravings.